Sports 365 Friday here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. We got a JAKIB Media YouTube channel contributor to join us. The host of Good Morning NFC East and also football writer for CBSSports.com, Jeff Kerr, jumps in. Hi, Jeff Kerr. Draw a line right here, right now. St. Patty's Day. Happy St. Patty's Day, by the way. Howie Roseman's grade for handling the Eagles offseason for Jeff Kerr, knowing it could change, go up or down going forward, but right here, right now, what kind of grade would you give Howie?
Well, considering a week ago, guys, I did not think Darius Slay and James Bradberry would be back on this team. Hey.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I think he's manipulated things very well, and he'll do better. This is where, sort of the second phase is where he kind of sets himself apart. And I always say from other GMs and contingencies is where Howie tends to set himself apart as well. But, also the gambling deals. Rashad Penny makes a lot of sense. Greedy Williams makes a lot of sense. They might end up being nothing, but it's not going to cost the Eagles anything to take a look at them. I always say about Howie, he makes smart decisions. And when you stack smart decisions, they don't always work. Robert Quinn didn't work. Jody's favorite player, Derek Barnett, he likes to bring him up. That didn't work last year. But most of his decisions worked. And that's because they're well thought out, well-informed decisions. That's how I put it. How do you see it?
Yeah, so when the Eagles signed Rashad Penny, he was one of those guys I was kind of thinking in the back of my head, I'm like, Eagles could probably get him on the cheap. And I was thinking maybe $4 or $5 million. No, they get him for $2 million, which is an awesome
1.6. He's got to hit incentives to get to $2 million.
To get to $2 million, right.
Exactly. Yeah. He actually has to play. But, I mean, if you look at his last 10 games, he's run for 1,017 yards, average 6.2 yards per carry, and he fits the offense better than what Miles Sanders did. And this is what I love about free agency sometimes. A lot of smart GMs are starting to get like this. Put players in a position where they can succeed. The Eagles are doing this with Rashad Penny. I think Carolina's doing that with Miles Sanders. I think Indianapolis is doing this with Gardner Minshew. As crazy as it sounds, and now the Eagles are doing this with Marcus Mariota. You're right.
By the way, guys, I got to meet Rashad yesterday. Really nice guy, by the way. He went around to every reporter there, introduced himself, which you don't see. Brandon Graham does it, but very few others. So number one, he made a good first impression with everybody, but and is he big? I said,
dude.
the Eagles signed a linebacker. I mean, he has got forearms like you wouldn't believe, and the neck, but he's incredibly elusive as well on top of it. It's pretty impressive. It's weird he had so many injury problems because he's so stinking big. You'd think everything would just bounce off of him. I don't know if it's going to work. And Miles is, for whatever reason, as you mentioned, maybe it was just the pitch yet, trying to kick it out too much. Wasn't a great receiver. Bottom line, 1,300-yard back, 11 touchdowns. That's really good production. And Rashad Penny has been injured. There's, as you point out, with those last 16, 17 games, you got to go a ways back to find those last 16, 17 games because he's never on the field.
Yeah, I think he's played. I think he's been injured more games than he's played since he's entered the league. And I mean, it's a shame because he is a really good player when he's healthy. And last year, it was kind of that weird situation where they draft Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker was going to be the guy in Seattle at some point, but Rashad Penny, outside of an injury, Kenneth Walker was not seeing the field the way people were wanted him to because of Rashad Penny. And Rashad Penny did everything he could to keep that job, and then he got hurt. And I thought Rashad Penny was the name everybody kind of forgot on that loaded free agent market. But I'll tell you what, I think it's one of those, like you said, John, it's a low risk, high reward move for the Eagles. But if he's healthy, you put him in with Kenny Gainwell, you put him in with Boston Scott, say they draft a running back at some point, that could be a really nice combination for them. I think their offense, in a way, did get better. And again, this is if Rashad Penny is healthy.
Other moves the Eagles have made here since free agency started. Just the other day, they brought back Fletcher Cox for another year. 1-year deal. Again, 1-year deals can only be so good or so bad because they are as short-term as they are. $10 million for Fletcher Cox. He played well last year, up to a $14 million number. Not for me, but well. $10 million projecting going forward for this year. Continuity counts. History with the team counts, but the bottom line is, can you play to a $10 million level? Do you think Fletcher Cox can do that?
Well, when there was another suitor that reportedly offered him more, and John, maybe you can clarify this a little bit better. Did you hear like 12, 13 million the Jets offered him, maybe even 14?
Yeah, I heard 12, 13 million for Fletcher. And Jets are obvious because of Joe Douglas, and Cleveland. There was a lot of talk about Cleveland because of Jim Schwartz and Andrew Berry and Cat Rage. He definitely could have gotten more. So was he going to get 14? No. But so 12, 13 makes sense. But I don't know if that's original reporting or people are just kind of connecting the dots. But yeah, I got it from two different people that he definitely turned down money elsewhere. How high that was, I can't tell you, but common sense says it was 12, 13.
And then this is where I kind of wish the social media world would understand $10 million. That's not bad for a defensive tackle of Fletcher Cox's status. I mean, these guys are getting paid. Look at what Javon Hargrave just got. He's getting $21 million from the 49ers.
Oh, yeah. Key tackles get paid.
Yeah, they get paid. And I think they needed a veteran defensive tackle in there. And does that rule them out from potentially drafting a young guy? No, but I think it helps Jordan Davis. I think it helps Milton Williams and Marlon Teopalutu. I actually got it right for guys like that.
Chewy Pelotu. You got Chewy Pelotu. Chewy's my guy.
At some point, I'm going to remember how to say that name. But anyway, it's kind of crazy to me how making $10 million as a defensive tackle for a guy who had 7 sacks last year and was getting pressure on the quarterback is frowned upon. And, I saw
especially in this town, Jeff. I talk about it all the time. I don't get the Fletcher Cox hate in this town. It's not everybody. It's always a small percentage. This is one of the best defensive players in the history of this franchise. Who
probably should get his number retired when it's all said and done.
Oh my God, he might go to the Hall of Fame. I was talking to Jody. Well, if Gary Myers on in the second hour, we can ask Gary. He was on the All Decade team. Gary's a voter. He was on the All Decade team in the 2010s. This is a 4-time All-Pro, 6-time Pro Bowl selection. I'm not saying he's a slam dunk, but he's in the conversation to be in a Hall of Fame level player. And I don't get it, man, because he doesn't have Brandon's personality. I don't know.
I had to rank the top after the Rams won the Super Bowl last year because of Donald, will he or will he not retire? He didn't. But they said in the event he does, why don't you go back in your history books and rank the top 10 defensive players of all time? And I was curious where I would fit Donald in there. If you looked at Donald's 7 years based on dominance, he was top 5 just based on what he did.
He's one of the best players of all time.
Yeah, and I just got tired of hearing Fletcher Cox. Well, he's not Aaron Donald. I go, well, I hate to tell you, no one's Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald's in a league of his own.
Yeah.
I guess I'll play devil's advocate here since you want answers, Johnny Mac. Was Fletcher Cox a $14 million a year player last year?
Probably not.
No.
Probably not.
Okay. So this year he's making 10. Will he be a $10 million a year player?
For this team, yes.
Right.
I think, I look at it in a different way. I look at it as about, Jeff brought up, you're talking about Jordan Davis and Milton Williams and Marlon Tuipulotu, all young players. I think there's value, just like I was talking with Greedy Williams, and we'll get the greedy with Jeff. Got to get greedy with Greedy. I think there's value to playing behind Darius Slay and James Bradberry for him. Maybe something clicks. I think there's value to playing behind Fletcher Cox for young players. So I think it's about more than just what happens on the field. But that's
we'll see. I don't, and you would know better than me because you're down there and you're talking to these guys. I don't remember any specific quotes from either Milton and or Marlin that the tutelage they're getting.
Oh, yeah, they talk about Fletch all the time.
Yeah,
they
do.
Yeah,
that locker room loves Fletcher Cox. He's not in the BG stratosphere, but who is? But I'll tell you what, those guys love Fletcher Cox in there.
Yeah, BG's more vocal, so it's more obvious with BG because he's the nicest human being in the world. He's got the most energy in the world to the point I can't even understand how he's got as much energy as he does. And nobody's Brandon Graham. I just talked about Rashad Penny. Rashad Penny introducing himself. That's the first time that's happened in Philadelphia since Brandon Graham. Doesn't happen a lot that people are that outgoing. So Fletcher goes about it a little bit different. He's way more low key. But as far as the players, Jody, yeah, they have tremendous reverence for Fletcher Cox. Number one, because he's an awesome player and he has been for a really long time. And number two, because he's really well schooled on how to play, similar to Slay and Bradberry at corner. Very savvy player, understands the role, so they sort of gravitate towards him.
I'll tell you one thing I really like about Cox too. Just seeing him in the locker room after games and seeing him in training camp. That guy knows how to stay in shape. I mean, you look at him, you're like, okay, this isn't the pinnacle of excellence here, but for a football player, he's in really good shape, and you can just tell like he does take care of his body. He wants to play in this league a long time, and for a guy who's 32, I mean, you see some bodies deteriorate. It's not Fletch.
That's funny you say that because a lot of people say, Fletcher played way too many reps for way too many years. And maybe that's why the downtick started. And every year the Eagles would talk about, we got to take some reps off Fletcher Cox's plate. And every year, they're like in the fourth quarter, well, I'm not taking Fletch off the field. And he's out there and he's out there and he's out there and he's out there. But people would say he's not in shape. I mean, certain people, not a lot of people, football shape. I think it's because Fletcher is a sweater, man. I mean, like one television light shows up and he's sweating. Especially when it's hot. So
he sweats when I interview him. Yeah. It's just it's the way he is. I don't know. And he's good at answering all the questions. It's just like you're right there. Like you put a camera in his face, he's just like, oh, okay. And then here, let me get a towel. And I'm like, all right, Fletch. I'm like, I see your what's that term? Easy perspirant, I guess. I forget what the.
All right, and I'll give you the only other question that I have about Fletcher Cox. And again, this is working off the assumption that the Jets did offer more money. I've seen no confirmation on the Jets' end, but some very good and on-point reporters have reported that's the fact. So I'll accept it to a point. So that's what it costs to keep him if you're the Philadelphia Eagles. They had to pay that amount. At some point, you got to turn your roster over. And Fletcher is of an age where you need to accept that he's going to have to earn the amount of money that you're going to pay him because you're not developing someone who's going to step in the future. That at some point you got to put younger guys into the lineup. And the Eagles, while they've done a very good job and they're back in it again to win this year and coming off what they did last year, that's the way I would have handled it if I were Howie Roseman. They're keeping some older guys in place. And if you want to continue to be a team that's in the Super Bowl mix year after year after year after year, then you got to churn a couple positions and you got to get younger. And they're not doing that with Fletcher Cox this year. They're not doing that with Brandon Graham this year. They're keeping some guys in place. And, oh, by the way, Brandon Graham earned his money this year, unquestioned. For the amount that he's making this upcoming year, I'll project more so he's worth what he's getting paid than Fletcher is worth what he's getting paid. That's the only other question you can have about Fletcher Cox. And I don't think it's unfair to put those questions out there. Do I think Fletcher Cox stinks? No. Do I think the Eagles made a mistake by re-signing Fletcher Cox? No. But do I think you can at least say, well, I'm not sure about it, or it's not a slam dunk winner? I don't think that's questioning Fletcher Cox or the Eagles. It's just evaluating the situation. And I think any Eagle fan, yours truly included, can do so with the last 2 years contracts and production for Fletcher Cox.
I always look at it this way, Jody. Is a rookie going to put up 40 pressures and 7 sacks? Say he does that again this year. Is a rookie going to do that? Like, is a rookie really going to be better than a guy like Darius Slay at this point? Probably not. But you could draft that rookie and groom that rookie under those two. And then when it's time to move on from them, say next year or in 2 years, I think this could be Fletcher Cox's last year with the Eagles. I'm starting to think that.
Yeah, well, it's a fair point by Jody, and it's not just Fletcher. It's BG. It's even Jason Kelsey. It's it's Darius Slay. It's this is an aging team. A lot of key players post 30. And that's part of the issue. I mean, they're proven, so they want to get paid. And we just went through this with Slay. They're good. They're still really good players. But if you're smart, you know the history of this league, and you know the decline is coming. So the old adage in sports, whoever, I think Branch Rickey gets credit for it. I don't know if he's the first to say it, but it's better to give up on a player a year early than a year late.
Yep.
And that's always a difficult tightrope. It's even more difficult when that player has had success for your team. I would say the Eagles have the core four, right? Well, the real core four, I'm going too much baseball, is the Yankees, the Derek Jeter Yankees, right? Jeter wasn't the player he was at the end, but the Yankees almost had to let him play it out because of what he meant to the organization, what he meant to the team. Similar situation with the Eagles in a bunch of these circumstances. It's difficult. I don't know how you
they're pillars.
Go down that road.
They're franchise pillars. Like, it's Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Jason Kelsey. Like, I remember, I think I saw on Twitter last week someone said, well, they should get rid of Jason Kelsey because it's that whole. I'm like, why? I'm like, what are you?
No, Kelsey's like Jeter. No, he goes as long as he wants.
Exactly. And Jason Kelsey wants to play with the cane at 45 years old. He can still block people. More power to him.
Yeah. It's part of it. I mean, you can't just, these are human beings as well. And I know everybody doesn't realize that, or a lot of people don't realize that. But in the case of Kelsey, though, yeah, I saw that same thing. I'm like, come on, where are we at? Where are we at in sports where we're so worried about the future? What everything's always worried about the future. The guy was an all-pro. He's playing, and now Kelsey himself, because he's very humble, will say, no, I'm not playing like I once did, as a nod to we can't see it. And he gives credit to Stoutland for putting him in great spots. And he gives credit for Isaac and Landon for being so good around him. But, he's being humble. You see the film. I mean, he's knocking people on their asses. He's downfield. He looks as good as he's ever been. Now, only he knows how he feels physically. But how you could say, oh, let's move on from Jason Kelsey because we drafted Cam Jurgens. That's just stupid asset management. No, I mean, it's the Sam Hinkie level of thinking.
Well, my favorite is you can't sit a second round pick 2 years. Why not? Aaron Rodgers sat.
Yeah.
It worked out pretty well.
3 years. He sat for 3 years.
Jordan Love sat for 3 years. I mean, he might be based on Green Bay's trajectory, he may be the next Aaron Rodgers for all we know.
It'll be the Jets quarterback in 2037.
Exactly.
Speaking of the human element, John, I kind of want to pick your brain on this too. Jody, I'm taking the host share from you here, but how about our boy CJ Gardner-Johnson right now?
Oh boy, tweeting and deleting. CJ.
Man, it's what, I didn't even see what he tweeted. But I get asked everything. You got any updates on him? Got any updates on them? Because of I reported Monday, and I said, "Oh no, I don't, or else I tweet about it."
Well, the tweet that he deleted last night was "The disrespect continues," and he put it up and he took it down shortly thereafter.
His market isn't what he thought it was going to be.
Right. And everybody wants to look at through their own prism as the way they probably should. But that's just the fact, Jack. When you hit free agency and your agent has the availability to talk to all 32 teams and you're not getting the money that you think you should get, guess what? It's 32-1. Yeah, you get your vote, you get to air your opinion, but the other 32 parties get theirs. And when they're on one side and you're on the other, that's not disrespect. That's miscalculation, CJGJ. You overvalued yourself if you believed that you were getting this knockdown, drop dead contract, and it's just not out there. And oh, by the way, we're now 4 days into this, so it isn't like it's about to just surface at some point. Yeah, he over evaluated himself, and I don't know where it's going to go because if he's feeling disrespected, he should be feeling disrespected by all 32 teams, which includes the Philadelphia Eagles. No more, no less. Maybe he thinks they should be willing to pay me more because I contributed to a Super Bowl team last year. I don't know if it's going to help the Eagles or hurt the Eagles.
He does think that, Jody, because I don't know if you guys go on the Instagram sphere, but he said, if I played all year, I'd have 12 interceptions. I'm like, well, he's selling himself. That's clear as day.
Yeah. Yeah, it is difficult because you do want that you see it all the time with veteran players. They're often not willing to take pay cuts from their original teams, but willing to go elsewhere to play less because they feel disrespected by their original teams. But you're right, Jody. I mean, it's a vote of the league entirely. And one of the reasons CJ isn't getting the money he wants is because he's on Twitter doing this nonsense. And I always say a lot of teams don't want to deal with that. Now, some do, some don't. But you never want to lower the field if you can, if you can control it. And his market is not what people thought his market would be. And that's good for the Eagles unless, as Jody pointed out, he feels completely disrespected by the Eagles. And I can't read his mind. He might be talking about his video game. He's always playing video games.
Yeah, he's always doing that stuff.
Yeah.
Man.
So, it might not even be about football. Well, it most likely is. I mean, but it could be other teams. It could be the Eagles. He's a tough guy to gauge. But I know he's not getting $14 million. I know that.
John, it's funny. So when I was talking to people in that camp, I did have a trusted source saying, he's not going to get near that franchise tag amount. You know that. And I was like, okay, and this was 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, so, what are we talking here? Maybe 10, 11 million. And I never got a response back on that. So I was.
Yeah, what I got, and I've said on the show, and I've told Jody, the Eagles really liked Marcus Williams last year. I mean, really liked him. As a player, and they bailed out. Yeah, and they bailed out when Baltimore went too high. And who I was talking to told me they're not paying CJ what they were going to pay Marcus. So
and Marcus got $14 million a year.
He got 12. He got 12.
That's right. That's right.
I said, and my first did. Well, things go up. That's sort of baked in. The salary cap goes up. So Marcus, if he was a free agent this year, would have gotten a little bit more than he got last year. That's sort of how things work. But he was pretty adamant, said, no, they're disciplined, focused. They're not going to go above their number. And I think he was right. So we'll see how it shakes out.
So there were a couple players that I was told that come back to us, test the market, and come back to us.
Oh, yeah.
Ironically, two of them aren't here anymore. One was Gardner-Minshew, and the other was C.J. Edwards. And the third is C.J. Gardner-Johnson. So I'm really curious to see what ends up with that because two of them, they're just not Eagles anymore.
And Howie played this game with Slay as well. He said, look, go test your market and, then you got to have the come to Jesus moment and say, I'm not getting what I'm getting.
And I think Slay really didn't want to leave at the end of the day. I think he's just like, you know what? Grass is fine here. I don't need to go somewhere else.
Here's the one thing I will, if I'm in CJ Gardner-Johnson's inner circle, that I'm kind of leaning on, if he's selling me the I'm being disrespected, I'm just not taking less argument. This isn't a great safety draft class. There's one safety, Branch from Alabama, who's a legit first-round draft pick. Everyone else after that is second round at best. So for the teams that don't have a safety yet and or have a hole at safety, Eagles being one of them, you're not plugging and playing an NFL first-round draft pick. Just grab them and throw them in there and know you're good to go. This is not a good safety draft class. So maybe that's why, at least from an agent standpoint, they're clinging to, yeah, we're being disrespected. Yeah, we're being under-offered at this point.
It's tough to think that, though, because I'm curious. I mean, there's obviously, if I'm looking at it correctly, just based on the safety market, he's got to make over $7 million, but I don't think he's making 10 or 11. So, I mean, when you look at what Marcus Epps and guys like that are getting paid, you're starting to think, okay, this is probably where it's going to end up. Now, whether it's like what John said, does he take an offer from, say, the Broncos, which I do know the Broncos are the other team interested. I think that's the other thing he's upset too. I think he thought there were going to be multiple bidders in here. And some people say Bengals, and I haven't heard anything about Cincinnati.
Now, they drafted that kid from Michigan last year as
Dax
the
Hill,
replacement for Jesse Bates. So,
and they signed Michael Thomas too. So we signed him. So
I think if he gets 10, 11 at this point, it's a big win for CJ. It's a big win for Kevin Connor, his agent. I think they're going to land at 8, 9. Anything less than 8, 9, it's a big loss. Yeah, that's how I would.
And if it's with the Eagles, and if he does stay with the Eagles, man, I'll tell you what, they're in a much better position than the Chiefs right now. I love Jawan Taylor, the player, but I can't believe the Chiefs paid him and didn't pay Orlando Brown when it seems like the only thing that really separated those two was guaranteed money.
Yeah, and I'm surprised Cincinnati went. But Cincinnati has changed when they're close to being a Super Bowl team and they realize it, and they were a Super Bowl team. They're going for it. They're typically known as one of the cheaper organizations in the NFL. And they gave Brown more guaranteed money than I think any offensive lineman in history. Is that correct, Jeff?
That is. So there was a team in that division I heard was after him, and that was Pittsburgh. And I tried to reach out to Brown, but I'm sure he's been busy. And I said, hey, is it true Pittsburgh offered you? And he never responded. But then again, last time I talked to Brown was at the Super Bowl. So, yeah, I'm curious to see what his other offers were. But I think Cincinnati said, you know what? We're not paying Jesse Bates. We're not paying the safety this money. We got young guys, but we still have some money to spend. Let's do it on him. Let's protect our biggest asset in Joe Burrow. And now I think you can move Jonah Williams over the right tackle. And I don't think La'el Collins is going to be a Bengal too much longer.
All right, let me do a little agent math here, and if you think I'm overstepping or I'm evaluating this incorrectly, please say so. Jesse Bates got an average of 16 and change million this year. I think it's just above 16, but it's basically 16 million per, with a bunch of it guaranteed. Marcus Epps got $6 million. If you're Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, do you not feel that you're closer to Bates than you are Marcus Epps?
He feels that way.
I mean, Jesse Bates is on a different stratosphere in terms of safeties. Let's just be real here.
But definitely, I mean, that's what I said. If CJ, I'm banking at this point, I think he's going to get 8 to 9 million. If he gets anything more than that, it's a win. If he gets anything less than that, it's a loss. But I think that's where he's settling in. And the market says what the market says. And you know what? If he wasn't a pain in the you-know-what at times, maybe he would be up at 11 million. Maybe he would be up.
This is what million. I kind of wish the fan base would understand. Yes, he's very popular on Twitter. And he was very popular on Saints Twitter too. But I'm telling you, there are people out there that are in the know. Is this guy more trouble than he's worth? And you're right, John, with the whole social media stuff. I mean, he didn't give the Eagles any problems last year, but
there
you never
was,
know.
that's not necessarily true,
Yeah,
Jeff. And
you know what?
Marcus, our buddy Marcus Hayes, did a piece on Denard Wilson leaving, and one of Denard's extra jobs was being babysitter for CJ. Yeah, I mean, the Eagles knew they were taking on a guy who could be an issue at times, but they felt they had a strong locker room, which they do.
And Slay and Bradberry helped.
Yeah. And it worked out. And that's why I think this is the best place for them, by the way, continuing, because they still have Slay and Bradberry. They don't have Denard Wilson, so we'll see. They don't technically have even a secondary coach right now, so we'll see how that shakes out. But the Eagles, are well versed in it. Other teams are not, and one of the reasons the Saints gave up on a talented player was because two reasons. I mean, the bigger reason, they didn't want to pay him what they projected he was going to get, and there's like maybe two. And I saw Jalen Hurts. Remember, this is Jalen Hurts, the leader of all leaders. Walk out of the locker room once when Chauncey was being a little bit too loud. So, take that for what it's worth.
All right, last thing on Chauncey and last thing for Jeff Kerr. Any chance that CJGJ with the Eagles or elsewhere signs a 1 year, I'm going to be on my best behavior deal? If his agent is advising them, the whole social media thing and acting out, and it probably has curbed our market, you kind of need to prove to the league that you can be a good team guy and you can keep yourself in check when need be. Any chance he does a 1 year deal with either Philly or anybody else?
It's a bet on yourself deal. I think the Eagles would like to sign him to multi-years and give him some guaranteed money there, but I don't think it's going to be like a 4 or 5 year deal. I honestly think it's going to be, again, this is just me speculating. This is just my opinion. I think it's going to be 2 or 3 years, if I'm being honest with myself.
Yeah, and you and I talked about that a little bit before. I forget who we were talking about. Jalen Hurts. Joe Banner keeps recommending to Jalen Hurts to take a short-term contract, get back on the market because you're going to make a lot of money. I would recommend Chauncey take a shorter contract, get back on the market, and have a chance to make more money. If I was Kevin Connor, that's what I would do.
And there are two people that could be in his corner if he plays with them the next couple of years, Slay and Bradberry, that are well respected around this league. I mean, I still can't believe the outpouring support from other players when this whole Slay thing was going down. Like, his former teammates and guys like that knows him. It's like, oh, like Slay, like what's going on, man? And as well as I do, John, with Bradberry, like there were so many people happy for Bradberry. Especially after
players are obviously they stick together in general, but
those two are well respected.
Oh man, I mean Slay is again, it was funny. His wife Jennifer is active on Twitter, Eagles Twitter as well.
She's very active on Twitter.
And, a lot of people, as they are wont to do, when Darius said goodbye, because remember, it was Slay who said goodbye on Twitter and, essentially confirming he was leaving and getting cut. A lot of people turned on him right away. Oh, Bradberry's better. Oh, he had a bad second half.
Do you like what Jen tweeted? I saved the receipts. That's all I did all day.
Yeah. They're in trouble. But inside the league, I mean, he's one of those guys who, everybody knows. You talk to the receivers, everybody knows. Jefferson, AJ, in-house. Everybody knows what Slay is. And Slay's one of the few real cornerback ones. I always compare it to starting pitchers in baseball. I've said that, Jody. There's 30 because there's got to be 30, right? There's 30 teams, right? There's 30 because there's got to be 30. There's not legit 30 number ones. Well, there's 32 cornerback ones in the NFL because there has to be, but there aren't 32 legitimate cornerback ones.
I would describe the Eagles the same way I describe the Phillies. They're lucky enough to have 2 aces.
Yeah.
I think they've got 2 aces. It's not there's one per team, but if the number is 32, certainly Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler are 2 of the best 32 starters in Major League Baseball. And no
but that's my point. It's
Bradberry and Slay are 2 of the top 32 cornerbacks.
There's probably 10. Yeah, they're definitely 2 of the top 32. But there's probably, my point is, there's probably 10 true cornerback ones, and Slay's in that category.
If I had to say this,
but do you put Bradberry in that category?
No. I'll say this: the Eagles got 2 of the top 15 cornerbacks in football. Bottom line.
I'd go 2 of the top 20.
Well, I'm basing this off last year, just based off last year.
Oh yeah, last year Bradberry was tremendous.
Last year Bradberry was the better of the 2 cornerbacks.
Yeah, I don't agree.
Yeah, I think Slay had a lot to do with that. But
yeah, so do I.
Yeah, we'll disagree on that one. Bradberry, to me, had the better year. Now, will I guarantee you that Bradberry has better this year? No, maybe Slay has a bounce back year and goes back by him. But Bradberry did go by him for my ranking and rating this year. We'll see how it plays. But either way, any way you slice it, Eagles got 2 of the best cornerbacks in the National Football League. JK, good stuff as always, brother. We'll be reading you on CBS. Looking forward to the return of Good Morning NFC East down the road. Thanks for jumping in today.
Always a pleasure, guys. I love coming on here.
Jeff
Thanks,
Kerr
Jeff.
with us,
Appreciate it.
Birds 365. All right, Johnny Mac coming back. We still got plenty more Eagles stuff to do. And now in less than 20 minutes, we'll be joined by our pal Gary Myers, longtime NFL writer, columnist, and NFL author. For years, he covered first the Dallas Cowboys, then the New York Giants. So he's been covering the NFC East forever and doing a lot of national television work. So GM Gary Myers is going to join us, about 18, 19.
And Hall of Fame voter. I love when we get Hall of Fame voters on.
That's true. We got 9 months or so to wait on this one since they do put them in February, but it's never a problem to look ahead to the Hall of Fame. Gary Myers will join us in about 18 minutes, coming back here next.